and thank you for joining us for Crossroads Politics here on WTHR. Plus, I'm Dustin Grove. A bill that Republicans say would expand Indiana's housing supply and lower the cost of housing could soon head to the Senate. I want to get to Emily Longnecker at the State House now. Emily, this is a key piece of legislation for House Republicans.
Yeah, Dustin, it is their main priority bill. They say that this bill will address Indiana's housing shortage and also roll back regulations that they say drive the cost up of building homes.
Today, members of the public got a chance to tell lawmakers what they think of the bill in a committee hearing. House Bill 1001 reduces local government's control over zoning, design standards, and fees for building, all with the goal of making it easier, faster, and cheaper to build more houses, especially smaller and more affordable ones. It also increases oversight on local housing decisions so the state can better understand when a builder is denied permission to build in a certain area. The lawmaker who authored the bill presented a change to it today that narrows the bill, rolling back some parts of the bill that are pro-density, meaning favoring different types of housing in the same area. Also under the changes, impact fees are capped and limited. Impact fees are a one-time charge placed on new development, including new housing, to help pay for public infrastructure and services needed because of that growth. Even with the changes, the bill brought out people who supported it and some who had concerns.
Now, House Bill 1001 makes housing construction more reliable and lightens the burden of excessive governmental red tape. This means new housing will come online quicker and at a more affordable price point.
Westfield's mayor testified the city he represents is the fastest growing city in Indiana, averaging close to 1,500 new building permits a year. He said the city had been working on a comprehensive plan, and the bill would present challenges to that plan.
HB 1001 would wipe away most of the work that has been done to ensure we have balanced and sustainable growth moving forward, and instead puts decision-making in the hands of national-level builders who are more focused on their bottom line than the community that they build in. While builders focus on delivering housing that meets market demands, they may not have the same insights that local governments do.
And enough lawmakers on the committee agree with what's in the bill and the changes made to it. It was amended on Thursday, adding some reports on things like the average price of homes and how many permits to build homes get denied in a year. It now awaits a final third read to pass out of the House and then head to the Senate. Dustin?
All right, Emily, thank you. I want to bring in Nikki Kelly, editor of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle now. How significant do you think were the changes this week to this bill?
I don't think they were very, very significant. A lot of data tracking, things like that. But, you know, it's a significant bill overall in the number of local regulations. It's basically going to preempt. I think lawmakers are trying to kind of thread the needle, right? You want cheaper, as in less expensive housing and more of it, but you don't want cheap housing, you know?
Yeah.
And locals don't want their communities to be full of kind of, you know, houses that people just slap up and, you know, in 3 years they're kind of crappy.
Yeah, codes and regulations are there for a reason.
Yep.
But you don't want them to be too cumbersome.
Correct.
So this is a priority for the House. Do you expect the Senate to make many changes, or are they going to sort of clear the runway on this thing?
Yeah, I think that behind the scenes, they've already been talking about that. It seems like the Senate's on board for most of what's in that bill. And, you know, you might see tweaks here and there, but nothing large scale different.
Okay, stay right there. I want to talk about another bill that a lot of people are talking about right now, and that is the bill to build an NFL stadium in Northwest Indiana, or to clear the way to build an NFL stadium in Northwest Indiana. It is advancing to the full Senate. The proposal comes as the Chicago Bears consider a move to the Hoosier State. That still sounds so weird to say. Senate Bill 27 would establish a stadium authority for the purpose of acquiring and financing certain facilities in the northwest part of the state. The city of Gary released these renderings you see right here. They released these renderings last week of several proposals for a new Bears stadium and surrounding plaza and economic development around it. The bill now heads for a second reading in the Senate. So, Nikki, this is a kind of race against Illinois to see who can give the Bears the best deal. How sweet is the pot here in Indiana versus Illinois?
I mean, The structure of it is pretty simple in that the state would go ahead, buy the land, build, issue bonds and build the stadium, and then the Bears would pay the debt off over, the years, and then they would have an option at the end to just take full ownership of it. So the state would have to come up with some money in the front. It's kind of like a really long term, no interest loan, right? And that's what it would be. So, I think everyone initially thought, oh, the Bears are just doing this to,
leverage.
Some leverage.
Yeah.
But the fact is, Indiana's not approaching it like that. And if they can offer up something that Illinois can't, the Bears would be kind of stupid not to at least consider it.
There were some back and forth conversations in the Appropriations Committee this week. There was some cynicism over the changes made to the bill. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't think there were massive changes. There were some requirements for, minority-owned business involvement that were removed.
Yeah.
There were like minimums. They were removed. And I think that goes along with the whole anti-DEI push that the administration has been doing. And so obviously some lawmakers on the Democrat side didn't like that. But, in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty small part of the bill.
Yeah. All right, Nikki, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a few. And we hope you come back as well. Still ahead, President Trump pulls back after tensions over Greenland sent the stock market tumbling on Tuesday. That's straight ahead. Also, we've got this.
I'll tell you what the cardiologist told me. He said, the CPR obviously saved my brain, but he said your heart would not have restarted without the AED.
A man explains his very personal reasons for wanting to keep life-saving devices in schools. That's next here on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. Lawmakers are looking at a bill right now that would roll back dozens of education rules, including one put in place just last year. I want to get back to Emily at the State House. Emily, this requires schools to have a piece of equipment at some events in case somebody goes into cardiac arrest, right?
Right, that's right, Dustin. As introduced, this bill would have rolled back a requirement to have AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, at schools and school events. As you said, that requirement just became a law last year after our 13 Investigates team revealed AEDs were not required in Indiana schools. The team's sidelined investigation exposed how the state delayed efforts to require the devices at schools. It's credited in helping the new law get passed. Well, now schools must have working AEDs at certain school events and plans in place to use them. And one Greene County man told us it should stay that way.
A long-awaited hug, followed by tears.
Oh, I'm glad to see you upright.
A moment shared between two people who barely knew each other about a month ago. But 66-year-old Myron Guy is here today, in part because of the actions of the woman sitting next to him, Alyssa Royal.
I was just at concession stand with my daughter, getting a Sprite.
Well, I'm
and
telling
I
you.
heard somebody say, is he okay? Do we need to call 911? And I was like, is everything okay? I'm a nurse. And I looked over and I was like, nope.
Myron collapsed last month at a basketball game here at White River Valley School in Greene County.
So I immediately ran over to him and I checked for a pulse, and he did not have a pulse. And so I told everyone that was around us that I'm going to start compressions. I need an AED immediately.
Interim School Superintendent Jason Walton says even before Indiana legislators passed a law last year requiring AEDs at school events, his district had them at every school.
Our mission is to take care of kids. And in this case, it was take care of a staff member, and really, really glad we had one.
So is Myron. He doesn't remember much of what happened.
I don't remember anybody working on me.
Only voices after the AED restarted his heart.
I'll tell you what the cardiologist told me. He said, the CPR obviously saved my brain, but he said your heart would not have restarted without the AED. It required the AED to restart my heart.
It could have been a very different outcome had we not had one.
That's why Myron hopes lawmakers will reconsider rolling back AED requirements in House Bill 1004. If anything, he thinks the state needs to require more AEDs in public spaces and businesses.
That's a device that they should be everywhere. I mean, just everywhere. Because, what's more precious than life?
And on Wednesday morning, lawmakers passed an amendment that restored those AED requirements. It also put back in that amendment mandatory training for coaches and other school leaders to have training in cardiac arrest procedures, what to do in case someone has a cardiac arrest. Dustin?
All right, Emily, thank you. So, Nikki, the goal of HB 1004 was to reduce education regulation, which isn't surprising. That's something that our Republican supermajority works on a lot, is to reduce what they call overburdensome regulation. The bill's author, though, Robert Baining, had insisted the bill as written did not remove the AED requirement, now the amendment. So it was in, then it was out, now it's back in again. Can you make sense of this?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say, watching deregulation bills come through, I've been covering the legislature for 25 years. We are constantly deregulating. We just had a huge deregulation bill for education last year, and apparently we still had enough for a new bill this year. So what you got to remember is dozens and dozens of those requirements that are in state law all have that kind of story behind them, right? Like when they were first put in, there was a reason why they put them in. And so, you know, it's a hard one to get at, especially taking it out the year after you put it in is kind of odd. And so, you know, they were all put in for a reason, and so people are going to obviously react when you want to take them out.
This is a huge bill. When our producer last checked, it was 165 other pages.
Last year's bill was even bigger.
Was it really?
Yeah.
So was there anything else in there that you're aware of that maybe other people might find surprising?
I didn't see anything that was, massively surprising. It's just a lot of little stuff, a lot of trainings that are required, or, forms they have to fill out for the government, that kind of stuff.
All right, so let's move on to another bill that a lot of people are talking about. We've covered a lot of the twists and turns on this one. Right now, state lawmakers are moving forward with a bill that would impact how your child uses a phone at school. This week, Senate Bill 78 just passed the Senate, now moves to the House. The bill would ban cell phone use for the entire school day. Right now, it's already banned for instructional time, but this would essentially be bell to bell. This passed the Senate with a vote of 28-19. Right now, the law here in Indiana, again, it requires all schools and charter schools to have the cell phone use policy on their website as well. Indiana law also only restricts phone use during class time, but it does allow it outside of the classroom.
It's premature, and I think it's just going to actually be a government overreach and an unfunded mandate.
Would cost nothing in academics, no additional teacher, or for academics, no additional programs, simply by pulling the cell phones from them, let the kids learn how to communicate and not rely so much on their phone.
Last month, the survey found about 63% of Indiana parents support the cell phone ban. I was listening to talk radio just yesterday about this, and it really seems split. There are a lot of people who say, absolutely, it's a distraction, it's unnecessary, let's focus on school. But other parents say they think this is a privacy issue, and they think it's a safety issue too.
Yeah, I mean, things are a lot different than they were during my time when, one of the things I hear against it is that the kids need to be in contact with their parents to talk about pickup or their practice that night, or, if they're not feeling well. I mean, those things, when I was growing up, we just went to the office or we called on a payphone.
And the parent called the office.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I think those things could honestly be, handled. The fascinating thing about this is the policy we have now, if the kids were still using it at lunch and passing periods, that meant they still had it in their pocket, right? And kids are going to still use it. And so the teachers were still having to, monitor it all day, even with the current policy. This was a much cleaner, you come in, you either don't bring it at all, or you put it in these secure ways, and then you pick it up at the end of the day.
Another part of this bill, 129, would restrict minors' access to social media. That one was sent to the Judiciary Committee in early December, hasn't gotten a hearing. Is that doomed?
Well, there was a standalone bill for that, and then there was an actual part of another bill, and so I think it's still moving forward. and should be okay. There was a lot more technology stuff in that bill than just that one section.
All right. More to come. Still ahead, U.S. Senator Jim Banks has now represented Indiana in Washington for a year. What does he think about the job he's done so far, and what work does he still have to do? He'll tell us. But first,
the United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it.
A showdown with U.S. allies over Greenland seems to be thawing. It's next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. This week, President Trump squared off with European leaders in Davos, Switzerland, as he demanded Denmark hand over Greenland to the U.S. Ivan Rodriguez reports the president appears to be softening his stance on the issue.
President Donald Trump says he has, quote, formed the framework of a future deal on Greenland after meeting with the NATO chief Mark Rutte in Davos, Switzerland.
Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
How long would the deal be, Mr. President?
Infinite.
Trump also said new tariffs are no longer needed on European nations that opposed his ambitions. Earlier, the president ruled out using the military to acquire Greenland. During his speech, Trump took aim at Switzerland, the host country of the World Economic Forum. He warned Canada to be grateful to the U.S. and questioned NATO's commitment to defend the U.S.
The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it. We give so much and we get so little in return.
Trump also slammed Denmark as ungrateful for refusing to relinquish control of Greenland, contending that the nation owed the U.S. for defending it during World War II. Repeatedly, the president also named Iceland when it appeared he meant to refer to Greenland.
I'm helping Europe, I'm helping NATO, and I've until the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They called me daddy, right, last time?
I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
And the president also backed down on his threats to put tariffs on European countries over Greenland. That saw stocks bounce back after plummeting over the president's threat when the markets opened on Tuesday. Staying with national politics now, on Thursday, former special counsel Jack Smith testified before Congress that Donald Trump planned to exploit the violence on January 6th and the questions he raised about the 2020 election.
Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state.
Smith has maintained he would have charged the president if he had not won the 2024 election, saying he found, quote, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Good news for the economy. Unemployment applications stayed low to start January, around 200,000. The 4-week average is the lowest it has been in 2 years, though continuing claims are hovering near a 4-year high, and estimates of GDP growth were revised up for the last quarter, showing a 4.4% increase. Still ahead.
He was enjoying it, of course, as a Hoosier and an IU fan and grad. One of the greatest nights of my life to see the Hoosiers pull off and win the national championship.
Senator Jim Banks talks about sitting with President Trump at IU's national championship win, and he answers questions ranging from Greenland to the border. It's next on Crossroads Politics.
Well, thanks for coming into studio today. I want to start with, you had a piece of bipartisan legislation that recently passed out of committee, and this is aiming to fight the fentanyl crisis. So talk to me a little bit about what Tyler's Law is and how do you think it's going to help Indiana?
Well, I served in the House for 8 years, and especially over the past 5 years, the number of moms or family members that I met across Indiana who had a loved one who died of fentanyl poisoning is really sad. And you hear their stories. Now, at this point, there aren't too many families in Indiana that haven't been affected one way or another by drug overdoses. So the fentanyl issue is real. A lot of times, a drug overdose with fentanyl involved, the fentanyl poisonings, oftentimes fentanyl is laced in something, and especially young people don't know that that's what they're taking, something that has fentanyl in it. So we have to do more to combat it. And the first thing we have to do is which is what we've done, is secure the border and stop it from flooding into our country. And President Trump has done that in a big way. In fact, the amount of fentanyl coming into the country is way down, and the number of overdoses is down too. But the second thing that we need to do is my bill, Tyler's law that we passed out of the Health Committee last week. It's bipartisan. Senator Padilla from California is my co-sponsor. Tyler was a young man in California. I was with his mom last week and visited with her. They didn't know when he overdosed that fentanyl was involved. Went to the hospital. They didn't test for fentanyl in the hospital. If they would have, they might have been able to save his life. And I think that's what we find in a lot of these cases. So Tyler's law would work with the Department of Health and Human Services to write better guidelines for hospitals on how to test for fentanyl when there is an overdose in the hospital, or someone who shows up with an overdose. So I think it'll go a long ways to saving lives of Hoosiers who are affected by it. Hopefully it will pass out of the Senate soon. We passed out of committee. It was bipartisan and unanimous. So hopefully we can pass it unanimously out of the Senate, send it to the House, and then send it to President Trump to sign into law as soon as we can.
Speaking of President Trump, yesterday marked 1 year of his inauguration for his second term. What do you think is the number one thing that he has accomplished in this last year that has helped Hoosiers?
Well, simply put, it's the border, and I think that's why he was overwhelmingly why he won the election, a historic mandate a year ago in 2024 to send him back to the White House to secure the border. I mean, at this point, we've seen the illegal crossings go 99% down from what they were before on Biden's watch. Secure the border, stop drugs from coming into our country, stop the violent crime that's involved. I think that in and of itself is the biggest win so far in the first year of the Trump administration. But also the tax cuts bill that permanently extended the tax cuts for working class Hoosiers, those men and women like my dad who went to work every day at a factory, people who work hard in Indiana whose tax cuts we permanently extended. And then on top of that, the new part of the tax cuts, the no taxes on tips, the no taxes on overtime, and my grandma loves the no taxes on Social Security. I mean, those are big wins. As people are filing their taxes right now, they're going to feel it when they get tax returns back that are bigger and better than what they got back before. I think that is those two things are what I point to as the big wins. I was with President Trump at the national championship game. Got to sit with him for a little bit for the game, and we talk about this all the time. 1 year down, 3 years to go. We can't waste a single day. We have a lot more work to do, and he's very focused on that. So am I. Over the next 3 years, what can we do to move this country forward? The national debt is something that we have to combat. We have spending bills that I'm going to go back to Washington next week that cut wasteful spending so that we can begin to bring down the national debt. I think that's something that we really have to focus on in a big way over the next 3 years.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, but first, when you were with him, were you able to discuss anything, advocate for anything that you think is really important to Indiana, to Hoosiers right now?
Well, I think, he loves Indiana. He won Indiana big in all 3 elections when he was on the ballot. We talk a lot about Hoosier veterans. We're well on our way because of the Trump administration to replacing the Roudebush Veterans Hospital in downtown Indianapolis. It serves 65,000 Hoosiers, and a lot of progress with a feasibility study that we just got that definitely recommends, this was a key piece of it, definitely recommends that we replace it. Now we have to fund it. I mean, it's a huge construction budget to replace the hospital, serving our veteran population. So I've been working with President Trump's Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, on that. He's very favorable. And Governor Braun, by the way, is very involved in making this happen too. It affects a lot of our Hoosier heroes who served our country in uniform. So that's something that I've talked to the president about. But we also talk about our military. I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I'm an Afghanistan veteran, and keeping America safe and secure. The Golden Dome is a big thing that President Trump and I have talked about a number of times. That's good for Indiana and good for America to keep us safe. But it's really good for Indiana because a lot of the technologies and the jobs to build the Golden Dome are right here in Indiana, from Crane to Fort Wayne. A lot of jobs on that front that are going to be a big part of that project, something that Indiana can be really proud of. But we also talk about Indiana football, and it was so much fun to be at the national championship game with the President of the United States. He was very focused on the game. He was enjoying it, of course, as a Hoosier and an IU fan and grad. One of the greatest nights of my life to see the Hoosiers pull off and win the national championship.
Absolutely. I do want to ask, and you touched on this a little bit, but what do you think the number one thing is that the president did not accomplish in his first year in this second term that you would like to see him focus on in the next 3 years?
Well, I think it's addressing the debt, and he's very focused on it. And it's up to Congress to do its job to cut wasteful spending and look at what this $38 trillion national debt is going to do to our kids' future and their ability to achieve the American dream. So he's put out budgets. His OMB director, who starts the budget process, puts out a budget proposal, and it cuts spending and puts us on a path to pay down the debt. So President Trump is focused on that. But I think the other thing, and President Trump's really focused on this too, is bringing down interest rates. Right now, the average age of a first-time home buyer in Indiana is 40 years old. I mean, my wife and I bought our first house when we were 25, right when we got married, and that's what helped us build our nest egg and start to pursue the American dream as a son of a factory worker who grew up in a trailer park. I mean, owning a home and building equity and pursuing the American dream, that's a big part of it. And we got to bring down interest rates and the cost to build and buy a home, and that's something that affects Hoosiers in a big way. And I know President Trump's focused on it. I'm on the Banking and Housing Committee in the Senate. We have a huge bill that we passed out of the Senate that tackles a lot of these issues. The House has got to pass it too, so we can send it to the president.
Yeah, how specifically do you think you can bring these costs down? Because it's something a lot of people talk about for really just a long time now.
Yeah, it's about the interest rates. That's a big part of it, but also the regulations to build a new house. I mean, I've talked to some of the Indiana home builders and the Indiana Home Builders Association. The cost of building a new house today, over 40% of that cost is to meet new regulations, and so we have to have more common sense and be more reasonable about what some of these regulations do that we don't need. And Indiana's focused on that. They're in session at the State House right now, and there are some bills to crack down on some of those regulations in the state of Indiana. But this is a national conversation too. But I would say first and foremost, bring down those interest rates. And by the way, government spending and the debt has a lot to do with the interest rate. So if you cut wasteful spending, bring down the national debt, make America healthier economically, that's going to help to bring down the interest rates too.
You have said that your focus is on putting Indiana first in Washington. So what does this mean to you in terms of implementing that in practical terms?
Well, I talked about the Roudebush Veterans Hospital. I'm on the Veterans Committee. I am a veteran. I care deeply about making sure that our veterans are taken care of. And I'm really, really proud of my first year in the Senate. My staff has served thousands of veterans who reach out to my office who need something. We move heaven and earth to do everything that we can to help them. But replacing the Roudebush Hospital in downtown Indianapolis is going to be a big part of that legacy of what I hope to achieve and fight for the state. But also, I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and Crane Navy Base in southern Indiana is the crown jewel of our state that most people have never heard of. But what's going on there on hypersonics research and all of I talked about the Golden Dome, to build the Golden Dome to keep America safe. I mean, a lot of that's happening with sophisticated technology, some of them that are classified that I can't talk about, that goes on at Crane, that we got to continue to grow. And I've been working hard on the Armed Services Committee in our defense bill to move more programs and do more work at Crane that creates thousands of new jobs and keeps America safe at the same time. So that's really good for our state too. But a lot of things I'm working on, from veterans issues to housing issues, that I hope to get done before the end of this Congress at the end of this year.
We talked about the cost of housing, and I think that's just one of the ways that Indiana families are talking about. They're feeling very squeezed by high costs right now. So what do you tell them that you're doing about that in D.C.?
Well, the Road to Housing Act is this huge bill that we passed out of the Banking and Housing Committee that I sit on. There are several provisions in it that I authored, and I worked with mayors all over the state, including the Democrat mayor of Terre Haute to the Republican mayor of Carmel. A lot of mayors across the state wrote letters of support and advised me on issues that we put into the bill, like taking vacated warehouses in cities and towns around Indiana and working with local communities to crack down on regulations and fund ways to take an old warehouse and turn that into apartments and or condos for people to move into and live in. You find in Indiana, you got a lot of vacant buildings like that we could turn into housing. So that's one big thing that we've worked on. We passed it out of the Senate. I hope the House takes it up and passes the bill to send it to the president to sign it. It'll have a big impact on cities and towns all over Indiana.
I want to talk about elections a little bit and just give you some background for this question, but the RNC chair has recently called President Trump the GOP's secret weapon that will help the party defy history in the midterm elections. You know, this is a time the party typically in power might lose some seats in Congress, but at the same time, there's a lot of polls coming out that are showing that the approval rating and maybe public opinion on the president and his agenda is souring. The Wall Street Journal has his approval rating at 45%, Reuters Ipsos at 41%, and then at the same time, only 35% of voters approve of how Republicans are doing their job in Congress right now. So how do you think you turn those numbers around, and what do you need to do differently to get these approval ratings up?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, our polling in Indiana, some public polling in Indiana, President Trump remains very popular in Indiana. His numbers are very strong. So. And I think the RNC chairman is right. I mean, when President Trump is on the ballot, you get people that show up to vote that don't show up to vote when he's not on the ballot. So, and that's why the midterms get tricky, because President Trump's not that magnet for the Trump voters who show up that vote. So he's going to go out and campaign, and he's going to be active in some of the swing states on the Senate races. There's a huge race in Michigan, a big race in Ohio that could determine who controls the Senate, and President Trump he won both of those states. He'll be campaigning in those states to help the Republican candidates win, and I imagine he'll be all over the country. His rallies are so big; they draw people out, they get people excited about the elections, and I'm not concerned about his favorability in these polls, because I don't think these polls reflect the forgotten men and women in this country who love President Trump and what he stands for, to put working class men and women first, who show up to vote for him and his agenda. He's not going to be on the ballot forever, though. So when he's not on the ballot, Republicans have to continue to push for his tough on illegal immigration policies, his law and order agenda. He put out a really strong health care plan last week that didn't get enough attention, that had 5 parts of what we can do in really bipartisan ways to bring more transparency, more competition to the market, to expand health savings accounts. I mean, the healthcare issue is, I think, one of the biggest issues going on right now with people who see their premiums skyrocketing. The Democrats want us to extend the Obamacare subsidies from the COVID subsidies, but that affects about 0.5% of all Americans, while most people are on plans that won't be affected by that. So President Trump put out a strong plan to bring down healthcare costs. Now Congress has a moral obligation to do whatever we can to bring down those costs, and I hope we do it quickly.
What's the solution, you think, to bring down those costs from a Republican senator standpoint?
It's the Trump plan: more transparency, the expanding the health savings accounts, instead of giving these subsidies and this government funding directly to insurance companies. Put it in a health savings account for the American people so that they can control it and use it, instead of it going to big corporations. So, and then the transparency plans on prescription drugs and on big hospitals. The Trump 5-point plan last week was simple, but it does all of that. And frankly, all of the ideas in Trump's healthcare plan last week are ideas that have historically been bipartisan, that Democrats would vote for. So I hope we can get some Democrats to come to the table and pass it, because a lot of people are getting hurt in the process, as they see their health care costs go up.
Why do you think that plan is better than what Democrats on the other side of the aisle have proposed?
Well, I mean, their only proposal, the only thing the Democrats are demanding right now, this is what the government shutdown was all about. If you recall, the longest government shutdown in American history, hurt a lot of people. And their demand the whole time was to extend the COVID-era Obamacare subsidies for 5 more years, not with no reforms, just extend those subsidies, that money that goes directly to the big insurance companies. And Republicans and President Trump said, no, we're not going to keep doing that because that doesn't work. That's not, look at what, I mean, your healthcare costs are going up, not down already. So what we got to do is we got to reform. Obamacare has been a disaster for this country. It eliminated competition. And President Trump's plan would increase competition, more transparency, prescription drugs, big insurance companies, big hospital companies. I mean, one of the biggest drivers of higher healthcare costs are hospital monopolies because they go in and buy up all the practices, they buy other hospitals, and they jack up the prices. And the Trump plan, the Republican plan, would create more competition and bring those prices down.
Do you think Republicans and Democrats in Congress right now are close to an agreement, or do you think you guys are still on really just different sides of this?
Unfortunately, the Democrat demand is extend those subsidies or nothing else, and Republicans are saying there's so many other things that we can do to. The Republican plan affects 100% of Americans. The plan and the Democrat demands to extend the Obamacare COVID-era subsidies only helps 0.5% of Americans. So let's do the right thing and reform a failed program in Obamacare, create more competition. Competition always brings down cost. That's how you do it, and that's what Republicans are focused on doing. Of course, there's room for compromise, and I'm willing to compromise with my Democrat colleagues to find a way to do that. But I think a lot of people are getting hurt as the Democrats are demanding, give me this and nothing else, and Republicans want to do something that will actually help all people.
What do you think that compromise could look like?
I think it's the Trump plan. I mean, every part of the Trump plan is something that my Democrat colleagues would have voted for in the past, but now they won't vote for it just because it's him. They don't want to give him a win. I think a lot of people are suffering in the process.
Speaking of President Trump, what would you tell people out there who claim Republicans in Congress have really been too loyal to him to the point of losing our system of checks and balances?
I think we have lots of checks and balances, but President Trump is strong. He's effective. He's in Europe right now, speaking with European leaders about our shared national security interest around the globe, and cracking down on Russia and China and getting malign Russian influence out of places like Greenland, and his focus on Iran. I mean, these protesters have been murdered by the violent regime in Iran. President Trump's been pushing back on him and telling them that we're going to hold you accountable if you keep doing that. So they stopped doing it. They stopped killing protesters when President Trump threatened them. And then what President Trump did in Venezuela is historic. It took out a narco-terrorist in Maduro and holding him accountable in the court of law for what he's done to flood our country with massive amounts of drugs and taking out these drug boats. I mean, it's very popular. It's the right thing to do. I think it's why we hired President Trump in the last election. So we have a process that works. This is the greatest country in the history of the world. We're celebrating our 250th birthday anniversary of this great country this year, and we have so much to be proud of.
But what do you think these are accomplishments that you're saying that he's made kind of around the world, but what do you think it means specifically for checks and balances in the United States and concerns that people have about things that he's done here?
We have checks and balances. I mean, we have a system and a process, and Congress passes bills, and the president leads our country from the executive branch. So I have no concerns about that because I see the process work. And at the end of the day, you have an election in November, and the American people have an opportunity to vote for different leadership in the House and the Senate. They might do that, and historically that's what would happen. But I think we have a lot of good news, much to be proud of in our 250th year, and I'm excited to be a part of those celebrations in Washington and in Indiana this year to celebrate this great country. This country is so good, has done so much. We have so much to be proud of, and that's what I'm focused on.
You brought up the president in Europe today. His speech at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, he did say today he would not use force to take over Greenland, but he did really double down on the U.S. taking control. So would you support the U.S. taking control over Greenland?
There's a lot of good reason for it. And, you know, at the end of the day, the president is using an economic approach. I don't think a military approach to this was ever on the table. That was a narrative. But President Trump is the ultimate negotiator. The art of the deal is at play here. And what he's doing, I think, at the end of the day, if you fast forward to where this all goes to, I mean, we talked about the Golden Dome a little bit ago. It's going to be made in Indiana. I mean, the satellites coming out of Fort Wayne, and a lot of the technologies and the research and the work coming out of Crane and all the businesses around Crane that are part of this Golden Dome. It's like the Iron Dome in Israel, but the Golden Dome would keep our hemisphere safe. And President Trump is the first president of my lifetime to really take a focus on that Monroe Doctrine and a focus on our own hemisphere. Just put out the national security strategy with a ultra focus on our hemisphere and on our part of the world, to take out the drug boats and the narco terrorists and put the Chinese on notice. Back to Greenland, put the Chinese on notice. You're not welcome here. Your malign activities are not welcome in South America. They're not welcome in Greenland. We're gonna hold you accountable for those things that you're doing that's adversarial to the United States of America. And I think when it comes to Greenland, he's looking for a greater military presence there, because the shipping lanes and the economic activities, especially with Russia and China in that territory, is concerning. And greater military presence there, and then using it as a key site for the Golden Dome is good for America. It's also good for Europe. I mean, Europe relies on America so much for support to push back on Russia. And President Trump has put them on notice. In fact, the Secretary General of NATO also said to this day, thank God we have President Trump, because he's pushing NATO to do more, to spend more, a greater focus on Europe. That's good for Europe. It's good for the United States. It's good for the world.
Yeah, you brought up the U.S.'s military presence in Greenland, so why not continue to partner with them?
We do, and we will. And by the way, I've been to Denmark. I've met with their leadership. I've had these conversations with them. They're uncomfortable, but they're open. I mean, there's a the big picture here, and I think Hoosiers get this. The big picture here is that there's a deal to be made, and President Trump is the ultimate deal maker. And it might not. I don't know. I can't predict where this will all go. Greenland might not become a state or a territory of the United States. But I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a greater American presence and relationship with Greenland, because we recognize the importance of it. They're independent people there, want to work with America more. They want to rely on America to help keep them safe, because they see that their part of the world is becoming more active with especially Russian military activity. In that part of the world, so I think they want America to help keep them safe, and I think we're gonna see a greater presence there. It's good for them, good for us, good for Europe too.
Keeping on international, on Ukraine, what specific conditions do you think would need to be met for you to support or oppose continued U.S. aid there?
Well, I think we got to bring the war to an end, and President Trump has done more than anybody, especially if you look back over the 4 years under President Biden when all of this started. I mean, weakness attracted Russia to invade. American weakness under Biden attracted Russia to invade Ukraine when they did. In fact, Putin said he never would have done that with President Trump and the White House, because he would have been afraid to do it, because President Trump and America would have pushed them back and reacted differently than what Biden did. But the large investment that America has made in this war, we can't keep giving blank checks to Ukraine. And President Trump has taken a different approach. He's been tough on both Ukraine and Russia to come to the table. He's also been tough on NATO and told NATO, and especially countries like Germany, you're relying on us too much. You're not doing enough yourself in your own backyard to step up and push back on Putin. So I don't know what that deal is going to look like, but I think we're closer than ever, because you have Zelensky and Putin and President Trump in the middle of it, trying to craft a deal to end the war, stop the war. President Trump has been especially tough on Putin lately. By the way, everything going on in Venezuela and the oil tankers that are going to Russia and supporting Russia's economy that President Trump has been confiscating and blocking them from going there is really, really bad for Putin and Russia. It's another example of how tough on Russia President Trump has really been.
You have in the past expressed concerns about election integrity. So what evidence-based reforms do you support that increase confidence, but also don't make it harder for eligible Americans to vote?
I think the most important thing that we can do, Indiana does this, voter ID laws. I mean, at the end of the day, that's first and foremost what we should do nationwide. You shouldn't be able to vote without an ID. We require an ID to buy alcohol or an ID to do almost anything that you do in this country. So why would we not require that at the voting booth? It doesn't make any sense to me. Hoosiers support voter ID laws. Like, I think it's 75–80% of Hoosiers support that, and we should do that around the country too.
What issue do you think Washington is ignoring that you think is going to be a major national problem in the next 5 years?
Well, I'll go back to the interest rates and the housing market. I mean, this is something that I think a lot about and I'm concerned about. I mean, how do you pursue the American dream when it's so darn expensive to buy a house? So that's something that I hope we focus on more. There are a lot of efforts, but that's something I hope we can do more of. And then again, not to be repetitive, but $38 trillion national debt. I mean, we spend more on the interest to pay down on the interest of the debt, to pay the interest of the debt than we do on the entire budget of the Pentagon. So think about, that's almost $1 trillion a year that we just pay on the interest of our national debt. Think about all the roads you could build, all the schools you could build, all of the military technologies that you could pay for. This country could do a lot with $1 trillion in 1 year. Instead, we're paying it to the Chinese and the holders of our debt every year just on the interest. So that's something that bothers me deeply that I hope we can get serious about.
My last question I want to ask you, we have talked over and over about data centers here. Yes. It feels like every single week we're hearing about a new one. We're at a new meeting with residents in that area, neighbors that have a lot of concerns about water usage and where these data centers are being built. So what do you say to them, and is this something that you think D.C. is paying attention to when Indiana is really becoming a hot spot for these data centers?
Yeah, I'm concerned about them too. I mean, if you build these data centers and then you see utility costs go way up, and I understand why people are concerned about that. I mean, a lot of this goes back to the AI race, and I mean, this country is rapidly changing. I mean, overnight when it comes to AI and what that's going to do to you ask about issues that concern me. I mean, what that's going to do to displace workers, and as AI drastically changes our economy, but then you have to build the data centers to be able to keep up with the energy that's needed, the data that's needed to run these programs is going to change the economy overnight. There's going to be good and bad, and people who are affected by it in negative ways and positive ways. I think our policymakers in Washington need to be really focused on that. But I understand why some of the local zoning issues related to data centers, again, go back to people's civic involvement and paying attention to these issues, showing up at some of these zoning meetings and making their voice heard. I think that's really important.
Is there legislation that you think Congress should be working on in D.C. when it comes to data centers, just as they become more and more something that's part of our society?
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a local and state issue, but I think at the federal level, I mean, you go back to the beginning of Trump's presidency this term, and remember he went to the Middle East, and a big part of that trip was negotiating with countries like Saudi Arabia to build, because they have all of this land and their climate. You could build a lot of data centers in places like Saudi Arabia to produce the data, and you got the energy to do it there. So you might be able to offset some of this in other places like that. And that was part of the trade agreements that President Trump negotiated with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Involves a lot of AI and data center issues and energy issues in the Middle East that might offset some of the concerns in places like Indiana.
Is there anything going on in Washington, D.C. that you think Hoosiers should be paying attention to right now?
Well, we have, we've funded 6 of the 12 appropriation bills, and remember the shutdown funded the government until the end of January. So we got a short window of time here to pass the spending bills to avoid another government shutdown, and this is a recess week. That's why I'm here this week in Indiana. The House is in session, so they're taking up these spending bills. Hopefully they pass them, send them to the Senate, and then we can send it, we can go back next week in the Senate, pass it, and avoid a government shutdown. I hope we never go through what we went through, the longest government shutdown in history. It affected our troops and our military, our progress in this country, because of what I thought was a silly political fight. Let's not go through that again. Let's fund the government, keep the government going, so we can make progress. And that over the next 2 weeks, that's what we'll be focused on in Washington.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be having a lot of conversations about healthcare when it comes to that
And
too.
healthcare.
But
yes,
Senator, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Dustin Grove. For Nikki, Emily, Jenna, and everybody here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.